Well, welcome to our Bible study on 1 Samuel. I'll begin this Bible study with a reading from 1 Samuel chapter 2. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord, no one besides you, no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who are full hire themselves out for food, but those who are hungry no more. She who is barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes, and he has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy ministered before the Lord under Eli the priest. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a 3-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled, and would plunge the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all of the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, "Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." If the person said to him, "Well, let the fat be burned first and then take whatever you want," the servant would answer, "No, hand it over now, and if you don't, I'll take it by force." This sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. Each year his mother made him a little robe and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, saying, "May the Lord give you children by this woman to take the place of the one she prayed for and gave to the Lord." Then they would go home. And the Lord was gracious to Hannah. She gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, the report I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. If one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender, but if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them?" His sons did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. And the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and favor with the Lord and with people. Now a man of God came to Eli and said to him, "This is what the Lord says. Did I not clearly reveal myself to your ancestors' family when they were in Egypt under Pharaoh? I chose your ancestor out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod in my presence. I also gave your ancestors' family all the food offerings presented by the Israelites. Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel? The Lord, the God of Israel, declares this: I promised that members of your family would minister before me forever, but now the Lord declares, far be it from me. Those who honor me I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained. The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and the strength of your priestly house, so that no one in it will reach old age, and you will see distress in my dwelling. Although good will be done to Israel, no one in your family line will ever reach old age. Every one of you that I do not cut off from serving at my altar, I will spare, only to destroy your sight and sap your strength, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life. And what happens to your 2 sons will be assigned to you. They will both die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly house, and they will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family line will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread and plead, 'Appoint me to some priestly office so I can have food to eat.'" I'd like to address Hannah's song, Eli's wicked sons, and the prophecy against Eli's house. First, let's talk about Hannah's song. It is one of the many songs by women of God who celebrate his work on their behalf. So you can think of Miriam, who sings a song on the other side of the Red Sea. You can think about Deborah, who sings a song after victory in battle. You can think about in the New Testament when Mary sings a song after Jesus, the famous Magnificat. Women who are given a gift from God celebrate that God brings victory instead of defeat, life instead of death, and children instead of infertility. These gifts reflect on the nature of God. We can also see a theology of grace in this passage. Hannah has not worked herself up to conceive a son. She hasn't psyched herself up for pregnancy. Only Yahweh can open closed wombs. This is a gift of his to an infertile woman. And part of God's salvation in Israel in this instance is connected to a change in leadership. Hannah says the wicked will be silenced and those who oppose the Lord will be broken, which moves us into our next point about those who oppose the Lord, specifically Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli. This introduces us to the theme of wicked sons who are failed leaders. They are guilty of two types of sins, one of which is obvious, their sexual misconduct, but the first seems a bit foreign to us. It has to do with the priestly share of the sacrificial meat of the animal given by the people of Israel to God. Eli's sons were not satisfied with the designated portions for priests and instead took whatever they could get, and they robbed their fellow Israelites in the process. This is a direct insult to God. Instead of waiting for the fat to burn before taking their portions, they basically seized the raw meat out of the hands of the people. The fat of the animal was considered the Lord's portion and not belonging to the priest. And this actually connects chapters 2 to 1. Elkanah's family was experiencing rivalry and infertility between Hannah and Peninnah. The family of Israel as a whole nation is experiencing corrupt leaders. So perhaps the connection between 1 and 2 shows us that the breakdown of the family is a sign of the breakdown of the nation and vice versa. When the Lord later speaks to Samuel, he says that Eli's great sin was his failure to rebuke his sons. Now, we do see that Eli says something to his sons, but apparently he did a poor job of it. He didn't address their sexual misconduct in his rebuke. His rebuke is vague and generic. It doesn't cut to the heart. And failure to give specific and truthful rebuke to his own sons is seen as a fatherly failure. And this is a persistent theme throughout the book. Finally, we read about judgment against the house of Eli due to the sins of Hophni and Phinehas and Eli. It seems at first like God is breaking his own promise. He said that the house would serve him forever, and now they're not. This is not a breaking of any kind of promise by God. God is cutting off Eli's sons in that particular line, but not the whole house of Levi. This is a partial discipline of Aaron's priestly line, but not a complete cutting off of the line. So this prophecy and judgment against Eli's house is not a total abrogation of God's promises. He is judging particular sins, and it's a partial discipline of Aaron's line. We see that this prophecy is fulfilled progressively through the various descendants of Eli in 1 Samuel chapter 4 and in chapter 14. Finally, Solomon, way later on, is going to drive that family totally from the priesthood. And the punishment fits the crime. Eli's sons had been getting fat from the Lord's bread, and the Lord's judgment is that they would be left begging for bread. In other words, God's judgment fits the crime, and his judgment is actually very patient. It gives this family a lot of time before he cuts them off. Here are 3 questions to think about in 1 Samuel chapter 2. What ideas in Hannah's song stick out to you? Second, in what other instances do failures in Israel's leadership negatively affect the nation as a whole? And finally, I said that God's judgment seems patient and that it fits the crime. But does God's judgment, in your opinion, seem harsh or fitting? Why or why not? I hope this Bible study is a blessing to you today.